wandering around out there. She found her way back. Here she is. And Kyle's here. Engaged Buddhism. I did an introduction on Tuesday. I'm going to do an introduction today. There's some overlap in the Sangha, so some of you may, in the 2 days, some of you may have heard this already, but I don't know about you, but I could hear the same thing over and over for the rest of my life, and hopefully I'll just keep hearing it. But I'm also not going to say the exact same thing. Bodhisattva vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. These are not passive. You might notice. Each one of these is an action statement. And completely impossible. What? You're going to save all beings? So that's the beauty of it, is you have to do something. But how to ground in the midst of this crazy, beautiful world and to find the appropriate response? It's like, wow. That makes bodhisattvas happy. They don't get overwhelmed. It's like, whoa, how can I help? How can I be here? So I think from the point of view of a bodhisattva, there is no such thing but engaged Buddhism. It's not like there's all these social activists and then there's other people doing meditation and just sitting around. It's like, how can you not be engaged in the world? If you were, I was thinking, it went through my mind, if you weren't engaged in the world, you'd be dead. But even then, you'd be engaged in the world because you'd be composting something or something. So the question is, how do we sit in the midst of it? And I want to recognize, well, some people were saying in the precepts class on Tuesday and maybe in their small groups, the world can feel, we're in, I think, a particularly difficult time right now. And it can feel overwhelming. And so what do we do? Do we close down? Do we go away? Do we get overwhelmed? This is what bodhisattvas ask. And we help each other. This is joyful. It's like, wow, I guess I'm not going to go to sleep right now. I mean, I'll sleep well at night, hopefully, sometimes not. But so what I want to do is ground this conversation, this Dharma dialogue, this bringing forward of voices of people who I really respect in these realms as thoughtful, deep, many of them conscious Buddhist practitioners, others people who are, I think, just wise. And wise in the realm of racial and economic and social justice and equality. Questions about violence. It's like, yay, what's going on here, folks? Not to mention wars. And if we want to save all beings, whatever that means, if we want all beings to be happy, if our deepest wish is for all beings to have a sense of well-being and peace and happiness, it always needs to start with touching the earth. Let's be here in our bodies so we can feel our hearts, so we can feel our nervous systems when they get overwhelmed, so we can watch our minds when they're just racing all over the place, so we can be conscious of our fear, and so we can touch our true nature, which is, this brings us to, I want to ground this, I'll be bringing forward, I think, over this period of time, the precepts. And I want to talk more about it on Sunday. Dogen's beautiful 28th chapter fascicle in Shobogenzo, the Bodhisattva's 4 methods of guidance. I pointed out on Sunday that it's going to be in the newsletter that different translations call it different things. Maybe I'll just do it. The Bodhisattva's 4 embracing actions is one translation. The Bodhisattva's 4 methods of guidance is another translation. 4 elements of a Bodhisattva's social relations. Isn't that interesting? I'll just read you the commentary from that one. Bodhisattva is a person who is pursuing, or I would say, trying to wake up to the deepest truth. There are 4 means and 4 elements, or social relations, or methods of social relations. The 4 are, you ready? Dana, generosity, freely giving. Priya Akyana, kind speech, or loving speech of loving kindness. Speech. Pay attention to your speech. Including and beginning with and ending with what kind of thoughts and thinking is going on in your own head. How are you talking to yourself? How are you talking about those other people out there? How are you talking about the world? Pay attention to speech. Kind speech. What is it? Artkaya. It's called, sometimes called beneficial action, or here it's called helpful conduct. What is it to be helpful anyway? What is it to be beneficial? I don't know about you, but sometimes I think I'm helping, and then I look at the other person and I think, whoa! I thought I was being helpful, but then you take the next step. So what is beneficial conduct? How do we be of help? And the 4th is a really wonderful samana artata, the identity, what's called identity action in one translation. And here it's called identity of purpose or cooperation. Maybe I'll say those again. These are translations from Katagiri Roshi of Dogen. Dogen says giving is non-greed. Pay attention to greed. Why do you think there are haves and have-nots? It's not because the have-nots are stupid. There are systems that are set up here. We're going to study some of that kindly. Because we so easily recognize the goodness of giving to human beings. The goodness of giving to human beings. The goodness of good giving, of sharing. Oh, it's Kristen! We need to pay particular attention to giving also to non-human beings and to the earth. So it's sentient and sentient beings. And in this time of climate crisis, I don't know, maybe it made that tree outside happy that we just went outside and did walking meditation around it. Who knows? Or maybe it helped us do walking meditation. I'm sure it's all of the above. And consider that everything, every single thing in this universe has, in fact, inherent rights. Hoping maybe there's a whole rights thing happening now about animals have legislation for animals have rights, and Native Americans' water has rights, and it's just a whole different way of looking at the world. Your right to life comes with life itself. Kind speech, Dogen says, means that when you see sentient beings, sentient, insentient beings, you arouse the heart of compassion. Oh, and offer words of loving care. It is contrary to cruel or violent speech. And we all know, most of us probably don't go around saying overtly cruel and violent things, but it's like, smell your words, pay attention. And mostly, I think, it's like study what happens when you hear cruel or violent speech, or when someone says something to you that hurts. It's like, breathe it in and then make a vow. How can I do this in a way that will take care of everyone? This is ongoing, forever and ever and ever. Dogen says to have beneficial action, we must benefit all classes of sentient beings, which is to care about their distant and near future and to help them by using skillful means. He is saying we must benefit all classes of beings, including air, soil, water, rocks. How do we live moment after moment? Joyfully, for the sake of all beings. I love this. These are koans. And Dogen defines identity action as non-difference from self and others. Non-difference from self, from other people, from creatures and inanimate objects is not based on ethical or philosophical notions that we all refrain from exclusion, that the world will be a better place. So this isn't about, someone said to me recently, do I want to say this? I don't know. We're not trying to turn into Calvinists. You know, I mean, Calvinists are great, but this isn't about being ethical and moral in this kind of sense. It comes out of love and compassion. It arises from the direct recognition that this here and now is the world, and it includes everything and the three times and all dimensions. Everything, each action, each thought. I think, wow, I don't know, this stuff makes me happy. And the fact that we get to do it together, and I have no idea how to do it, moment after moment, but I know I have a deep vow, and I know I make mistakes all the time, and life is one constant mistake, so we're just going to keep helping each other. What else are we going to do? And that's what we're going to do in this period of time with engaged Buddhism, is how do we enter this realm and not get overwhelmed or bogged down or despairing, or that there's just more joy and energy. So, on Tuesday, I shared a little bit from All About Love, New Visions from Bell Hooks. I was going to read just a couple things that I didn't get to do on Tuesday. Because it turns out that maybe one way to name what it is that this is all about is love. But then, what is love? Big love, small love? So we're going to be investigating that a little bit, this love thing. She says, love in action is always about service. What we do to enhance spiritual growth. Interesting. A focus on individual reflection, contemplation, and deep dialogue is vital to healing. But it is not the only way to recover ourselves. Serving others is a fruitful path to the heart. To truly serve, we must always empty the ego, so that space can exist for us to recognize the needs of others and be capable of fulfilling them. That's what we do in Zazen. At the end of the exhale, you empty yourself. You empty the self over and over, all the way on the exhale. Nobody's there. And then there's an in-breath in the whole world. It's all here. That's serving others, not to mention yourself. Breathing the whole world in and out is being of service, consciously, sitting down in the middle of it. The greater our compassion, the more aware we are of ways to extend ourselves to others that makes healing possible. How to live on the earth with the vow of to cause no harm, knowing of course you're going to cause harm. There's no way to live without causing harm. And to be able to feel it in a way that's tenderizing and poignant. To know compassion fully is to engage in a process of forgiveness, forgiving self and other, and recognition that enables us to release all the baggage we carry that serves as a barrier to healing. Compassion, compassion, compassion opens the way for individuals to feel empathy for others without judgment. Judging others increases our alienation. Judging ourselves creates alienation. Study it. That's all. Pay attention. There's nothing here that you can't experience here. and if you don't, then see what is here and study that. Compassion and forgiveness reconnect us. Forgiveness not only enables us to overcome estrangement, doesn't mean you have to, forgiveness is a tricky thing. It's not like if somebody does something that really hurts you, don't jump over anything to forgive somebody. But to me, forgiveness has the root word of give, generosity, in the center of it. So what the action looks like, we don't know. But there is some way of sitting in the middle of generosity of don't know mind, of beginner's mind. That's different than, would you please forgive that person? And you say, no, that person's a jerk. And I thought, yeah, well, that person really did do something. So don't try to pretend that didn't happen, but sit in the midst of it and breathe with it. We're entering probably a pretty nasty political period here. So let's take all these things just breath by breath for the sake of the whole world, because we're all going to get scared, probably. We're all going to get triggered. Breathe. It is a process of emptying out wherein we let go all the waste, so there is a clear place within where we can see the other as ourselves. And here's one wonderful way to do it. It's from James Baldwin. From his essay, Down at the Cross. Be sensual. This isn't about being moralistic. To be sensual is to respect and rejoice in the force of life itself, and to be present in all that one does, from the effort of loving to the breaking of bread. Living simply, in the body, with the senses. Let the spring day blow you away, and then see what's left and what the appropriate response is, so that everybody maybe can be just transformed by the wonder of a spring day, and remember that whoever you thought your enemy was, maybe it's not what you thought was going on anyway. Something bigger is happening. Okay, so now I wanted to have a little time. Rebecca Solnit is a rather extraordinary person who writes all kinds of amazing things. I would recommend her to you unconditionally. She's a Buddhist practitioner. A Zen. She practices with Joan Halifax. This book, her latest one, is called Not Too Late, Changing the Climate Story from Despair to Possibility. She's been doing that for a long time, talking about hope and talking about maybe one of the things that liberals do is that liberals never stop to enjoy anything. It's like something happens and then you just go on to the next problem or the next worry she just like, it's like, take a breath for God's sake. Sensual is good. So I have a little bit of time and I want you to read some of what she has to say. Maybe I'll have to edit it a little bit more, but then I want you to have a little time to talk. This is the last chapter of the book. If you ever do that, go to the last chapter. It's called Packing and Unpacking for an Emergency. So she's talking about the climate crisis, but we could easily put any, gun violence, racial disparity, social inequity, homelessness. We could put a lot of these things in here. I live in earthquake country, where we're all urged to prepare a kit to evacuate or shelter in place for when the big one shakes us up. Not far away, people live where climate chaos, fueled by wildflowers, mean they may have to flee on short notice with what they can grab. We're putting our thing on top of our car, which we keep packed up through the summer now because we've been evacuated 3 times. So we just want to have stuff there. If we have to go, we're going to go. This isn't over there. In other parts of North America, hurricane evacuation has long been part of life. Mostly when we talk about packing for an emergency, we talk about tangible goods. Flashlights, first aid kits, water, documents, and keepsakes, things like that. That's what we're putting up on the top of our car storage. But there's another way. We can pack and unpack for emergencies. The stories, ideas, values, aspirations, and facts we carry strengthen or weaken us, disconnect or connect us, motivate or demoralize us. They not only prepare us to face emergencies, but also how to change whether and how they happen. Doesn't this sound like what we just were talking about? That is, they make us who we are, and who we are has everything we do to do with who and what survives. What will you take with you in an emergency? I ask this question a lot, not just to the top of my car. That's why I do the top of my car. But I want us to ask, what are we cultivating, taking with us in this emergency of being alive? What are you packing for the emergency that is the age of climate change? A crisis tests stories and beliefs. Some break, some get stronger, some change. Some stories are life rafts or desert springs. Some are poison or prison or heavier than we can carry where we need to go. One underlying story worth unpacking tells us we're too fragile to face hard things. Bodhisattvas, are you out of your mind? That if we are sad, we will break, and we should never be sad because it's a kind of failure. But sadness is an appropriate response, for goodness sakes, to threat and damage to what you love, and the underlying love matters. Cultivate love. That's why this book includes Roshi Joan Halifax's reminder that grief and fear can be a kind of doorway. Please, don't turn away from grief and fear. Enter it together. We're going to be doing some of that without being overwhelmed or despondent. I like this. In now famous words, they're famous, I guess, but I didn't know them. Maybe you do. Prison abolitionists Miriam Kaba tells us that hope is a discipline. Hope is a discipline. This isn't hope as optimism, which assumes everything will be fine and nothing is required of us. That's only the flip side of pessimism and despair, which otherwise requires nothing of us and buffers us from uncertainty. Let me read that again. Pessimism and despair requires nothing of us and buffers us from uncertainty. The future is a night in which we cannot see far. We can only navigate it by looking to the past, where we count our victories, learn from our defeats, measure change, and see how power grows and imagination shifts. Study it. Most victories are partial or compromised. Nearly all of them are interim because the story continues. Often winning is made up of what did not happen, and thus what cannot be seen, and we only know about it through story. The radical poet Muriel Rukeyser said long ago, the universe is made up of stories, not of atoms. Choosing the stories you yourself are made of is crucial work as we enter this unfinished story of how human beings respond to the greatest emergency our species has ever faced. My story is the Bodhisattva vows. And we're going to use Dogen's 4 methods of being a Bodhisattva so that we can keep planting and watering seeds. And hope is a discipline. I like that. And she talks about the story that we've talked about before, about the story of when Ananda goes to Buddha and says, what's the most important part? Are spiritual friends a part of the spiritual path? And the Buddha says, oh no, Ananda, they're the whole of the Buddhist path. It's the whole of the path, having good spiritual friends. A lot, she says here, of climate grief seems to be connected to loneliness. Did you see that the Surgeon General just came out and said there's an epidemic of loneliness happening in this country? It's like, wow, wow. It's why we come to Sangha. It's why we practice interconnectedness and interbe, because how can you fundamentally, I mean, of course we can be lonely, but how can you fundamentally be lonely if when you sit down, the whole world comes forward and touches you and loves you? And that there's this mutual interaction and breathing that happens, which is not to say we don't get lonely or despairing. Breathe. Being with people who do care helps. And so does evidence that the majority of people do and want to see and help and change things. This means that some of the most pleasant things imaginable, building relationships and friendships, getting to know the people around you, are also the most crucial. Wow. Isn't that kind of wonderful? Kindness, generosity, loving speech, beneficial action. Who are you? Wow. Identity action. Here we are together, facing into the spring day. And maybe one last thing. Oh, this is her fine. No, it's not. This book is a love story. This book, there it is again, is a love story. Each person who writes something in here is writing because they love. Love for the coming generations, love for the community around them, love for the natural world, love for justice, for truth, for possibilities. That's what bodhisattvas are. Underneath the fury is love. Find what you love and make sure you never lose sight of it. Find what you love and make sure you never lose sight of it. We are sometimes told that pleasure, beauty, and joy are not necessary, but they help us keep our bearings, keep our strength, keep our vision, and there can be all these things in the future we're making. In the past, climate justice involved getting people to emphasize danger and loss. It's like, pay attention, it's really awful. Don't you understand how bad it is? I mean, it really is that bad, right? It really is that bad. She says, we've succeeded so well that I believe we now, well, not always. I mean, it's not like you can put that part down. We're a little more awake. But this is really important. I now believe we need to balance that with attention to the places that are still thriving, still beautiful, still provide respite and a sense of order. In our hearts, in our bodies, in our vowing, in our stories. Okay. So you can, I'm going to put you in groups of 3. You'll have about 15 minutes. One question is,